You said you think Limbaugh and Hannity, that they're actually dark side. Give us your view on that.
Well, the way that I make that decision, I look at how they handle the conspiracy issue. It's one thing to doubt conspiracy. I mean, we don't know, none of us know everything that's going on behind the scenes in the dark side of government. So there's a big black hole of information because the government is keeping it secret. So it's one thing to say, I really have doubts about this and this, and I have doubts about that. But that's not what Hannity and O'Reilly or Limbaugh do now. Now, Limbaugh used to, before he made his first big $3 million contract in his radio career, he used to be pro-conspiracy. He used to talk about it openly. He made that contract, and the next day, he wasn't just saying, I'm not sure about conspiracy anymore. You could tell he hated it, and he was going to denigrate and excoriate any person who brought that subject up, and he proceeded to do so. The same thing happens with Hannity and O'Reilly. Yeah, they've got that constant smirk on their face that, to me, is an indication that there's not a legitimate sincerity. But that smirk really turns to total disgust, total denigration when they start to talk to anybody who's got conspiracy. And they're not satisfied to merely say, hey, you brought up some good points. They won't even let them finish a sentence. And that means that they bought into the concept, which I believe is part of the media conspiracy, that we must denigrate this issue of conspiracy so that no one dares bring that up
so that none dare call it conspiracy, so that once the global system emerges after they've built it, just like a giant ship built in a hangar, it opens up and outslides the ship into the harbor. They've now launched the world government. They're now in the BBC, Times of London, AP, Time Magazine saying world government's the answer to all your problems, and it's exactly what Joel Skousen said 50 years ago. It's what you said 30 years ago. It's what I said 15 years ago. It's what Ron Paul said 30 years ago. It's a private global banking cartel through fractional reserve banking dominating the globe. And we said the carbon tax was a fraud to fund the world government. They now admit it's to fund the world government. So what are Limbaugh and Hannity going to do whenever Hannity has Dick Morris on, and Dick Morris says they were conspiracy theories about the one world currency and the new world order and the plan to destroy America, but now they're not, and Hannity, in that video clip, looked completely freaked out, and every time he has guests on now, they're now agreeing with us. Beck is talking about world government and things, at least partially. So it looks like a catch-22. If the establishment continues to just brazenly deny all this after it's out in the open, it's going to completely politically discredit them. So I think they're putting their toe in the water with Glenn Beck. And I think with somebody who's real, like Andrew Napolitano, from my research,
he is.
They're starting to put their whole foot in, and it's almost like they're starting to hedge their bets, thinking they may lose. Go ahead.
Well, as I say, I think they have the war card they're going to play in order, so they may give a little bit on the conspiracy, admit a little bit, but they will never go all the way and admit that this is really real and really a threat. I'll tell you why conspiracy is so important for the media to denigrate. This is going to be the primal issue that they're going to use to institute wholesale roundup of dissidents someday. When this war occurs, when there's a preemptive nuclear strike on America by Russia and China, our leaders are going to come out of their bunkers, and believe me, they built brand new, very, very deep underground bunkers in the Washington, D.C. area. So that if they hit the Greenbrier, they hit other places, they still have their bunkers. But they'll come out of their bunkers, which are not being built for a terrorist attack, and say, the Russians deceived us, we didn't realize this was going to happen, we're innocent. Just like 9/11, we were ignorant, don't fire us, we're the only ones capable of running this new government. But they will convince America in the panic of having major destruction in this country that they must give rebuilding power to a militarized world government. And when that war is prosecuted, all with the patriotism and knee-jerk reaction, getting behind government, just like in World War II, even though our own government was instigated starting a lot of this, they're going to have to deal with dissidents. They're going to have to deal with the Joel Skousens and the Alex Joneses who say our government knew in advance this was a conspiracy to bring war upon us, to force us into a new world order. And they will say, mark my words, those people who believe that our government conspired to do this are traitors. They're being unfaithful to our troops. They're not supporting our troops. We need to lock them up. And so the issue of conspiracy must always be made an evil in this society to justify locking people up. And
but if it's a Muslim conspiracy, that can exist because they control those decoys. It's that government and big corporations can't stage events, and that's why they hate 9/11 Truth so much in all its variants, because it introduces the idea that Gulf of Tonkin was staged, which is admitted, and Operation Ajax was staged. And once people start seeing things for what they really are and who stands to gain, that could potentially, if 9/11 Truth became completely mainstream, take away this globalist nuclear sneak attack. And the reason I agree with you, Joel, studying the entire geopolitical constellation, is when you read the State Department memorandums, when you read the Pentagon training, when you read NLE 09, when I've talked to colonels and generals who are now retired and JAG officers here on the air, they on record, this is public, and they have video games, countless games out with this same script, the same plot, that America is going to be nuked by domestic terrorists working with the Russians or Chinese. So they'll nuke us, blame it on the Russians or let the Russians do it, and then blame it on Joel Skousen, or Alex Jones. And in these video games, they torture the patriots. It's wonderful. It's so much fun. But to make a long story short, they are getting the military ready for the United States to be devastated and for I-4 NATO, UN troops to occupy us. And you see Henry Kissinger and others saying, all we need is the right major crisis, and the people of the United States will accept the New World Order. They will accept United Nations troops on the streets of America. And so because I realize they need a bold, devastating stroke to really re-engineer the United States into the ultimate army and to roll out their secret weapons and take over the planet with the Anglo-American establishment duking it out with the Chinese and Russians, that is exactly the type of thing they will do, is nuke major cities and use it to totally take over. And absolutely, that's when they're going to send teams to arrest tens of thousands of Americans who they know are patriots. And that's when we're going to have to defend ourselves if it comes to that.
Well, and unfortunately, they're not going to allow people to prepare for that. That's why I have not believed that there'll ever be any domestic terrorism using nuclear weapons. In fact, there's a lot of disinformation about loose nukes going around. In fact, the suitcase nukes are the most guarded, prized possessions, the jewels of weaponry within the Soviet Union, the continuing Soviets, and the United States government. They have not been let loose. That was simply an excuse to be able to allow the government to romp around and foment the terrorist threat image. But if they were to allow a loose nuke to go off, a small one, for example, what would the American people want to do? They want to prepare against nuclear radiation, and our government does not want people prepared for this. They want us held hostage to this great preemptive nuclear strike that they're planning on unleashing upon us, so that there's a maximum panic. That's why when I may have explained in the last show, when I was hired, my architectural firm, high security firm, to design nuclear prefab fallout shelters for Pakistan, the government in Pakistan nixed it. They said, we do not want anybody marketing private fallout shelters in Pakistan. The same policy as the U.S. government. We do not want anybody prepared for nuclear war. Why? Because they know it's coming. They're preparing. Why not the American people?
Well, we know that there were cases in the 60s, 70s, and 80s where the establishment wanted to have a nuclear war, and they talked about how they could get even greater control over society. I mean, that's the only way they're really going to end our free society and really try to get our guns, is by a catastrophic psychological wound so that we will accept this new tyranny. And Joel, do you believe that 9/11 was a beta test for a massive controlled nuclear strike?
Well, I don't think it was a beta test. I think it was a prelude to preparing the nation or to see how much they could be manipulated with a terrorist strike. I mean, if they could pull off 9/11 and get and subvert all of the truth that came out about government involvement and explosives involved in the world, if they could subvert that, they knew that they could pull off a major preemptive nuclear strike and subvert the information that I have and put out on my website on how they have been covering for the Russians how they've been continuing to allow Russia to build up and transfer technology to Russia and China, knowing that they're going to someday attack. I mean, they have to be able to cover up this information. They did it in World War II. They built up Hitler's forces in Krupp and Tyson and in the other German military firms.
Yeah, that's the M.O.
And they successfully covered that up. So they're practicing, shall we say, on how good can we cover things up, how can we use the controlled media to do that. And they've got a real problem with the Internet, with the alternative media. We're getting stronger. We're getting a lot more adherence.
Haven't you written a paper, in fact, I remember reading it years ago, about safe places in the United States?
That's right. In fact, I have a new third edition coming out in a couple of months of what is called Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places. And
where do you think the safest place in North America is? I mean, I know being in Central Texas, we're a major target of nukes, but if the globalists are launching the attack, will they want to destroy our own military, or will it just be the major cities to reduce population?
No, they'll actually go after the military almost exclusively.
Yes.
That's why I predict there's only about 15 major cities that will be destroyed. They don't want to destroy all the population. They want to harness that abject panic in favor of the New World Order and rebuilding and going after this, prosecuting this patriotic war afterwards. And so
they want to kill the old military, bring in the foreign troops, hype up the new conscripts to go under UN globalist control. So obviously you're saying Fort Hood's a prime target for the globalist controlled strike.
Yeah, it certainly is. Every major military base is going to be a target, as well as many of the underground bases that they know about. And there's going to be some devastation, but people can survive it. It's very, very survivable. The Russians intend to survive this and continue to work. And so people ought not to believe the propaganda about absolute. I mean, there's going to be a tremendous devastation, if nothing else, from the EMP strike.
When do you believe the globalists are going to pull the strings on their Chinese and Russian minions? Well, I mean, as you said, they don't control them. They've built them up.
Right.
I mean, when do you see this conflict being planned?
I say that my best prediction is that it's only a 50% chance by the midway in this decade, 2015, about a 90% chance by the end of this decade. I frankly think it's going to take longer to pull off just because of the Russia and China especially isn't ready yet.
So 2020, you see NORAD standing down and hundreds of nukes raining down on the military.
I see that there's a 90% probability in that time frame that that's when that strike is going to come. So we do have time to prepare. It isn't a panic situation, but people, yes, we fight for liberty. We've got to realize we've got to be prepared for a takedown. In other words, it isn't enough to just go blindly optimistic.
Well, look at the globalist. Look at NAFTA and GATT. Look at the family. Everything they do is to destroy this Christian nation. That's their number one mission, and I tend to agree with you. I think they're going to blow the living daylights out of this country, and I mean, all the evidence shows they're building towards that.
It's amazing, Alex, how many in my former career as a high-security architect, how many, when I was doing jobs in Colorado and the Denver and Aspen, Colorado area, how many times contractors say, did you help design that bunker system for that house over there? He's ex-CIA and he's ex-FBI. And, these people who've been deep into government in the dark side, they know this attack is coming. They're building bunker things in their retreats out in Colorado and other ski resorts in Utah and things, and contractors know about it, but the American people don't.
Yeah, I mean, people keep saying the New World Order will never win, they'll never get our guns. Oh, yeah? Once